This is a live Channels television event.
So clearly, Ogun State to me today has come up with a clear value proposition. I have this theory that like any organization, any state, and even any country, you must have a clear value proposition. You must be very clear as to what it is you bring to the table. And until you identify that, you don't know what it is you all have to focus on. So for us in Ogun State, it is clear that this value proposition, from my perception, is revolving around two major areas. The first is agriculture. The second is transforming the outcome of agriculture into something that can be sold to the ultimate customer. So you have somebody that is transforming that which we pull from the ground into something that we can literally put on the table. And that really is Ogun State's value proposition of being an industrial state, of being a manufacturing state, a state that is focused on adding value, looking at issues about value propositions and things of that nature. So it is so clear that the private sector has become the name of the game as far as Ogun State is concerned. Ogun State has embraced the concept of working with the private sector because clearly a country, a region that does not look after the private sector can never succeed. And that is really part of what we're all suffering from. The country has depended so much on our revenues that we fail to look at the private sector, we fail to nurture the private sector. That should really be the funding part of government. But because oil has gone, we turn around, there is no private sector, everybody seems to be struggling. But Ogun State, thankfully, like some other regions in the country, has been slightly ahead of the game. I was talking to the governor yesterday and he confirmed to me that at least we've got about 96 new investments that have come into the region over the period. And also he certainly targeted that he'll be hitting 100 and well above that. And what that means is that, like I said, Ogun State is really pulling ahead of everybody else. Now, what you find as a result of that is that investors seek to find an investor-friendly destination. And today, one of the things that I hope we will discuss this morning is what do we mean by a place being investor-friendly? What do we mean by saying a place or region or state is attractive? What do we mean by saying that the state is competitive? These are some of the things that will come out of our conversations this morning to show the things that one must continue to do in order to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. But all this has implications. And it has implications with respect to the civil service structure, the civil service functioning in the state. Because you see, if you don't have a civil service that represents the government and the governance of the state, working hand in hand with the private sector and making life easy for the private sector to thrive, then it will be failing. It is the civil service structure, it is the civil service system, it is the positive bureaucracy that we must face that's going to help us to engage with the private sector, encourage the private sector, give them the comfort that coming to this state is something that is going to be beneficial to them and give a good return on their investment. So on the other side of the coin, we are saying we want to invite investors, but we must behave in a way that accommodates them. That leads me to the fact that Ogun State miraculously, and I use the word miraculously, moved from a position of 36 in the doing business index to 5. And that is a huge leap. And it's showing that yes, it has become aware and is sensitive to those things that are essential for any investor coming into the state in meeting all their needs and making life a lot easier for them. And there's so many factors that you can look at that they've done very, very well in. And one really must congratulate them. In the midst of all this, we're saying, do we have the right ecosystem to support the state, to support investment? The World Economic Forum had said earlier on when they do their global competitiveness ratings, which again is really relevant to us here in Nigeria. Don't forget that any point in time, Ogun State is competing with about 36 other states if we include the Federal Capital Territory. So there's an internal competition that is going on, and it is the ability to make yourself the most attractive state in the country that helps us to become the most or more attractive country in the global arena. So when you look at the ratings and the issues and the factors that the World Economic Forum looks at in order to assess whether a state or a country is attractive, we also have to continue to look at those things. And it has to do with the institutions in the state, the legal and judicial system, the law enforcement ability, the protection of investments by the law, having standards, level of compliance, property rights, and things of that nature. From an institutional point of view, we must have in place. The second thing is infrastructure, which we all talk about all the time. We say that we must have a drainage system, roads. We know there's a huge ambitious plan to build a railway system from the state to attract and make transportation a lot easier. We have issues on power, telecoms, and so on. And of course, you've got the issues about the macro issues about taxation in the state. But probably more important, that which is more sustainable, has to do with issues about education, the quality of people. So if I'm coming in, do I get the right people that can work in my factories, the right people that I can engage? All these are matters that one must take into consideration in saying, is this the place to be? Now, statistically speaking, if you've got about 96 plus industries or in institutions coming into the state, it is so clear that Ogun State must be doing the right thing. Now, having said all that, we have here with us here in the panel people or organizations that have been here for many years, those that are very recent, and clearly there must be something that has attracted them to the state. There must be something that has kept them to stay in the state. And there must be a lot more that is encouraging a lot of them to make additional investments, significant investments going into the future. There's no way any new investor will come into a place unless he sees that those that are already there are doing very well, are extremely satisfied, and will continue to expand in their activities. Now, having said all that and created that kind of a background, and I want to talk, and I'm going to start with Unilever right here beside me, as to what has guided you in the past. You've been around for a long time. What are the things that you find that's working well for you in the States? What are the kind of advice you would eventually give to individuals or others that are investing? Even what things must we get right? What more must the state do for you? And what proudly you can say are you doing for the state? So let's start off with you, and then we'll hope we can have a conversation about this afterwards.
Is this live yet? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your question. It's a dangerous question because if I'm not careful to answer that question fully, I could speak for 1 hour non-stop. So I'm going to try to just give bullet points so that there's space for others to contribute and that we can develop the conversation. And for that very reason, I would like to take it from a fairly high level, and then we will go into the details as we progress. I think one of the things that really distinguishes Ogun State, and my point of view, is that the competition that Ogun State has to go through is not just with the 36 states of Nigeria, because capital is today so mobile that it is a reality that while it is one of the states that make up the Federation of Nigeria, it is also competing for capital that could go anywhere else out of Nigeria, and it needs to see itself in the international plane. The reason I define the context that way is because I feel that Ogun State is setting a path as a thought leader when it comes to people-centered development and thinking about development in a very integrated way. There is a very strong overlap with Unilever's own Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, which believes very strongly that business must decouple growth from adverse environmental impacts. Now, particularly, I was here, I think, a week or two ago, and I saw the celebration of a green economy. If you're people who are thinking about the long-term development of a place, you feel very strongly that business has to play a role in tackling some of the deep problems that society is facing, and you see a state that is so far-reaching in its thought process like Ogun State, that has to be the main attraction point, because you are participating in building an ecosystem that will endure. And in the end, all businesses must be thinking about legacy in that sort of context. So for me, that is the most distinctive feature There's specific attributes of competitiveness we can talk about, and we will obviously come to the hardware, which is the roads, the infrastructure that is being built, the fact that the middle class, the fact that we have a government in Ogun State that is accessible, that understands the investment climate, that understands also the way that the private sector works. But more important than that, it gives priority to the private sector, is that it gives priority to people. People are the center of Ogun State's development effort. And at the end of the day, those of us in the private sector understand that there is no way to build an enduring business model if we do not put people first and if communities do not thrive. And for me, that is the most distinguishing feature of Ogun State, one that I think is an example for many states, not just in Nigeria, but many communities elsewhere in Africa can borrow from.
Fantastic.